This happened a few years ago when I went to Walmart for Black Friday shopping. I thought it would be a good idea to bring my wife and kids along so they could pick out what they wanted, but it just made the whole grueling process more complicated. The store was full as hell. There were shit tons of people, wall to wall. If it had been just myself and a shopping cart, I could have made my way through the crowd much easier, but instead I had my wife and 2 kids who kept wandering off to look at different things, forcing me to chase them down every 5 minutes. I couldn't risk them having any interactions with the insane people that were there, fighting over stuff and shouting over who deserved what. Then, because the lines for checkout were so horrendously long, it took us nearly an hour to get to a register, and then another 30 minutes just to get through the parking lot and on the road. We got home at around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and by then I was exhausted. Of course, that's when I got a call from work saying I needed to come in for the night shift, despite the fact that I had requested the whole weekend off. I apparently had to fill in for somebody who had gotten sick. I was annoyed as hell, but there was nothing I could do to get out of it. On my way there, I passed by the same Walmart from earlier that day, and I had to stop at the red light at the entrance to its parking lot. It was totally empty now, and all the lights were off. However, I saw just one person in the area. It was a lone woman at the corner by the entrance. She was old and wore a very revealing dress that someone her age shouldn't be wearing. I also remember seeing her twitching and sniffing the air in a suspicious crackhead manner, and when I made eye contact with her, she started waving at me, telling me to come over to her. Just then, the light turned green. I contemplated leaving her alone, but I had a nagging feeling I should approach her. I was pretty sure I knew where this was going, but maybe there was an off chance that she just needed some help. Hoping for the best and preparing for the worst, I took a left turn and drove over to her. As soon as I stopped and started rolling down the window, she was leaning in and talking to me.
"You want my Black Friday deal, Johnny boy?"
Excuse me?
"I've got a huge Black Friday sale. My clothes are 100% off in the back seat. That sound good to you?"
I'm kinda married.
"Oh, you think I'm going to track down your wife and snitch? Half of my clientele is married. Your missus doesn't need to know about me."
I don't know. It just feels like this is a bad idea. You're not even really my type. No offense.
"None taken, doll. I know I ain't as pretty as I used to be, but it's what's on the inside that counts. Why don't you just close your eyes and let me work my magic? I think you'll be surprised by what I'm capable of."
I mean, when you put it like that, it does kind of sound good. How much would it, cost?
$50, all inclusive.
Well, this is my first time doing this. Is that a good deal?
It's a Black Friday sale. I ain't normally so cheap.
Alright, I guess. Hop in. Do you know someplace a little bit more private?
I know just the place.
She eventually had me drive into a dead-end alley. That's when I put my hand over her wrist and made my move. "You're an undercover police officer. You're under arrest for soliciting yourself. You have the right to remain silent."
"Not an undie! Let me go! I'm going to kill you! Help me! He's a pig!"
After a few minutes of struggling to restrain the woman, I managed to get her in handcuffs and transferred her to the back of the car. But she kicked and screamed the whole time and even spat on me. Before I left the scene, I called in some backup. The woman never admitted to her so-called Black Friday sale that she was offering me. Either way, she knew she screwed up and was going to jail. Trying to solicit me, an undercover cop? That's the worst possible thing she could have done while streetwalking. However, I sometimes wish I had just driven on by instead of picking her up. I was able to make an arrest that probably saved a bunch of lowlives willing to spend $50 for some Black Friday deals. Impromptu stings like that are very dangerous, much more so than coordinated sting operations. Every night during Black Friday, I think back to that night and wonder how close I came to biting it. This story was inspired by a bizarre Black Friday incident regarding undercover detectives with the Baton Rouge Police Department who used Black Friday to conduct a street-level sting operation and ended the day with at least one arrest. Undercover officers report that while posing as a quote-unquote Johns within the 2200 block of Scenic Highway, they spotted a woman named Tammy Lynn Shepard walking along the highway and called her over. Once Shepard was at their unmarked police vehicle, detectives say she offered her services in exchange for money. As a result, Shepard was arrested and booked into East Baton Rouge Parish Prison.
This happened to me years ago, but it still affects me to this day. It happened when I was working at Wendy's, going to college classes during the day and working there at night. I didn't mind the work at Wendy's. It was never very busy during my shifts. The restaurant closed down at the beginning of the night, so all I had to worry about were the drive-thru orders, unless it was a Friday or Saturday night, which was our busiest days, as expected. The late night only had 2 people working, one person to take the orders and someone like me to cook them. Naturally, this meant I knew all of my coworkers pretty well, as they were the only people to talk to during downtime. I was okay with all of them except this one guy named Dylan. This guy was a creepy-looking weirdo. He had wacky-looking hair like Rick from Rick and Morty. He didn't seem to care about hygiene either. He gave me the creeps every time I saw him. I knew my shift was going to be hell every time he was my coworker for the night. I would say that he was super into me, but it's really more like he was dying to get into the pants of every girl he saw. He came on to every single girl that he took orders from in the drive-thru. It was slightly amusing to see him get shut down 99% of the time, but it wasn't so funny knowing that I was next. He truly had no concept of boundaries or empathy, and he only saw women as objects. He asked me out a million times, and I declined every single time. But the guy always thought there'd be a chance I'd reconsider, because he never stopped hitting on me. Things only got worse. The longer I worked at Wendy's, Dylan started getting more brazen and started suggesting we have quickies at work. He would try to convince me to sleep with him multiple times a night, and each time he suggested a different spot, either the bathroom or the cooler or the kitchen. And a few times he tried to get me to do it right under the drive-thru window. I tried to be more stern and tell him that was never going to happen, but it was like I could never get it through his head that I didn't like him. I considered reporting him to the manager after every night I worked with him, but I never did. I was too scared of how he would react. The only thing worse than someone being creepy toward me was someone being mad at me. It went on like this for months, until one night, I had had enough. Dylan was absolutely egregious with his advances that night. He knew I was a timid person, and he was taking full advantage of it. He knew I hadn't told anyone about anything he did. At one point during the shift, he came up to the grill and tried to grab my hand while saying one of his usual pickup lines. I swatted his hand away and almost slapped him across the face with the spatula, but I held myself back and cussed him out.
Don't touch me! Just leave me alone! God, you're such a creep!
Wow, someone's a little spicy tonight. Spicy like the spicy chicken sandwich. But I bet you taste better, sweetheart.
Dylan shrugged it off after seeing a customer come up to the intercom, so he went back to the window. A couple hours passed, and Dylan was oddly quiet. I started to think that I had finally done it. I had finally gotten Dylan off my back. Gone were the days of having to hide from him in the bathroom and dreading when there was no work to distract him. Later, past midnight, we had some downtime. I noticed I was low on some things that I would definitely need to get through the rest of my shift, so I went into the cooler to get some inventory. I was crouched down with my back to the door, looking for the right thing when I heard the door open and close again. I froze for a moment, as I was genuinely shitting bricks. My heart began racing instantly. I didn't want to turn around. I knew it had to be Dylan. I then slowly turned my head around and saw Dylan standing over me, his face deranged like a psycho.
What are you doing here? You should get back to the window.
Chill out, baby. I've been waiting a long time for this, so I'll make it quick.
He pinned me
to the floor as I screamed for help.
Help! Somebody help me! Get him off me!
After a few moments of sheer horror, I managed to kick and scream and fight my way out of his grasp. I was able to hit him in a vulnerable spot and get away, bursting through the cooler door and running to the customers in line for help. They called the police and Dylan was later arrested. He kept saying it was a misunderstanding and that everything was consensual, but there were quite a few factors that made it obvious to the cops that he was lying. Mainly the fact that he had covered the camera in the cooler with a box, as well as a few other cameras in the building. He was clearly anticipating what he did to me, and was lucky enough that it didn't get as far as it could have. However, I still feel the scars from that horrifying night. The story was inspired by a horrific incident regarding a Wendy's employee who was arrested after a forcible altercation with a female coworker inside the fast food restaurant's cooler. The alleged incident occurred on a Sunday morning in Pompano Beach, Florida. A 25-year-old man named Tressel Huffman followed the woman into a cooler and proceeded to force himself on her as she tried to push him off. The incident only came to an end when the suspect failed to get it up. The female worker was then able to break free. She ran across the street and called the cops. After reviewing surveillance footage, authorities said that they witnessed Huffman place a box in front of the camera that faced the cooler. The manager of the location told detectives that all employees are aware that blocking cameras is strictly forbidden. According to the warrant, Huffman was inconsistent in his interview with the police and claimed the encounter was consensual. Huffman was later arrested and charged with the attack, along with kidnapping, false imprisonment, and battery. He was taken to jail and is being held without bond.
This may be the most horrifying Thanksgiving story ever. What happened still traumatizes me till this day, but I think now is the best time to share it. It all happened a few years ago. I had just recently moved to the US and was working as a model. It wasn't a great gig, but it was the only work I could find. I didn't make much money as a model. It was barely enough to survive. I ended up having to rent the shittiest apartment I could find, and I was still late on my rent half the time. I never seemed to be able to catch a break. It went on like that for years. I got more and more desperate as time went on. By the time I was 24, I was even worse off than I was before, and it was only a matter of time before I was out on the streets. Then one night, I met this older guy at a bar. We had a few drinks together, and he ended up offering to let me stay at his place in exchange for being intimate. I knew it was probably a bad idea, but I was desperate. I agreed to do it. Things escalated quickly after that. We ended up getting married within a month. I was desperate as hell, and figured the trade-off of being taken care of financially would be worth it. The guy had a really nice place, and I finally didn't have to worry about where my next meal was coming from. The guy seemed okay too, but all of that quickly changed. It didn't take long for me to realize what an asshole the man was. He treated me horribly. The old piece of shit was just using me, and I had to go through with it every time he wanted to. I hated it, but I didn't have a choice. I had to put up with the rich drunk just to make it through life. It went on like that for a while. I wasn't desperate for money anymore, but I didn't know if I was better off than before or not. Then one night, the two of us were watching TV a few days before Thanksgiving. My husband got drunk as we sat there, which was typical for him. He couldn't go 10 minutes without having a beer. I was pretty used to it at that point. Then, as we sat there, he suddenly turned to me and asked me if he could stuff me like a turkey. I refused, but he kept asking me over and over again. It was obvious that he was completely plastered, so I snapped and blew up at him.
It's not going to happen, so just leave me the hell alone.
My yelling caused him to stop talking for a moment, and I thought that I had finally gotten him to shut up. But then out of nowhere, the guy went apeshit and lunged at me.
I should have got a prenup!
Before I could even react, the psycho grabbed me and tried pinning me down. I kicked and screamed, trying to break out of his grasp. The guy was too drunk to hold me down for long. I then finally managed to break free and run to the washroom. I was able to lock myself in, just as the monster caught up with me. He then started banging on the door and throwing his whole body against it, trying to break it down. He kept banging on the door until he eventually passed out. I waited in the washroom, sobbing. I didn't know what to do. I knew I was safe here and better off waiting for the rest of the night. Eventually, hours went by. I didn't hear him out there again. I didn't know where he had gone, but I knew that I had to take my chance. I slowly opened the door, but there was nothing. He was nowhere around. It was dark everywhere. I paused for a moment, wondering what to do. Then I eventually armed myself with the clothes ironed and scissors from the bedroom, and then walked back out. I then slowly crept down the stairs and walked to the living room. I was shitting bricks. I knew he had to be in there. I tried to be as quiet as I could. The TV was still on when I got there, and my husband was passed out drunk on the couch. From the looks of it, he had been out for a while. I stood there staring at him. At first it was minutes, but then it was a few hours. I didn't move once. I just stood in place, still holding the scissors and the clothes iron. It felt like forever, but he eventually woke up. It didn't take long for him to see me standing there. He blinked a few times, obviously confused.
What are you?
A few days later, it was Thanksgiving. I woke up early to get everything ready. There was a lot to do. I made the stuffing for the turkey first. It took a while, but I knew it was going to be worth it when it was time to eat. It was finally going to be ready. I was hungry as hell. His relatives eventually started calling his phone every single day, but he never seemed to answer though. I didn't bother to answer it either. I didn't want to jeopardize and interfere with any of his calls. The cops eventually showed up, and I was arrested not long after that. It wasn't until they took me away that I fully realized what I had done. I've been traumatized by Thanksgiving ever since, but I don't regret what I did. This story was inspired by a disturbing Thanksgiving story that we did last year, but wanted to revisit it, as it might be the creepiest Thanksgiving case still to this day. The case we are talking about is a 24-year-old woman named Imagary Ari Nelson, who is known as the real-life cannibal, Hannibal Lecter. She was an Egyptian nanny and model. It started out like any other Thanksgiving day in November of 1991, but instead of turkey, Imagry's husband, Mr. Nelson, was on the menu. It was reported that Imagry would sleep with a lot of older men growing up in exchange for renting cars. William Bill Nelson, a 56-year-old pilot, would eventually meet with Imagry in a bar. They seemed to fall in love pretty quickly, as they were married within a month, but things went left very quickly between the two shortly after. On Thanksgiving Day, Imagry would take the husband out with the clothes iron and scissors. She would then chop and use his remains with leftover Thanksgiving turkey. She was arrested after, and allegedly offered a friend money to help her dispose of it. She was convicted and sentenced to 28 years to life. I was at home watching TV and mindlessly scrolling on my phone when I suddenly got the munchies. I was hungry as hell and didn't have anything to eat, but that's when I remembered the hype about Wendy's launching the new Krabby Patty, and there was a Wendy's not too far from my place, so I got dressed and started walking over to satisfy my craving. When I walked in, I was shocked by the sight of the freakiest, most gigantic woman I have ever seen working at the register. If Wendy's was serving Krabby Patties, this woman was Miss Puff after a boating accident. I'd never seen her there in all the times I went to that Wendy's before. Her skin was so wrinkly that it looked like there was grease flowing down the crevices of her face. She must have had a stroke after eating the entire stock of Krabby Patties and Baconators. Things only got worse as I walked up to her. The woman had these creepy, bulgy, lazy eyes that didn't even look at me, and her smile was completely crooked. She looked dead, like an old dementia patient that wandered off and got hit by a car. After staring at her uncomfortably for a few minutes, I told myself I was just freaked out because of my particular state of mind at the time, but I eventually placed my order.
Hi. I'd like a Krabby Patty meal, please.
Good choice. Do you know the secret formula?
I don't know. I just want something to eat.
I'm sure you're used to eating something with crabs. You want anything to drink with that?
Lady, just get me my Krabby Patty.
Wait here. We're a little short-staffed tonight, so I'll be with your Krabby Patty.
The short encounter with her seemed to drag on forever. A lot of things were off about her. I was just glad it was over. Once I paid and got my receipt, I found a seat nearby. Nobody else was in the restaurant even though it wasn't that late. For some reason, it took forever for my food to be ready. Maybe about 10 or 15 minutes of scrolling on my phone later, the nasty old lady finally came back to the counter with my tray. I quickly walked up and snatched it. I then sat down and went right for the Krabby Patty, undoing its container and taking a huge bite. About 3 seconds into chewing, a horrible pungent flavor spoiled the whole bite. I kept chewing for a second, thinking maybe it was supposed to be the tang of some kind of tartar sauce they were using. But it just got worse. It was like piss, battery acid, and snot all mixed together. Before I knew it, the rotten flavor triggered my gag reflex, and I vomited all over the table. I couldn't stop dry heaving and choking on bile. I collapsed out of the chair and crawled to the bathroom, where I fought for my life. Once I could finally walk again, I stormed out of the bathroom and slammed my fists on the counter, demanding to see the woman who served me when nobody was brave enough to answer me. I lost control and hopped over the counter. I searched everywhere for her, but all I could find was a sad, cowering fry cook and an innocent-looking girl at the drive-thru. Neither of them seemed like the type to lace my food, and the fry cook even told me where the woman was hiding. She locked herself in the office, so I ran to the door and started trying to beat it down.
What did you do to my food, you nasty bitch? Come out here, you Mrs. Pump look-alike. I'm gonna cave your skull in.
I eventually accepted the fact that I wouldn't be able to reach her, which was unfortunate, because in that moment, all I wanted to do was drag her by the hair and shove her head into the toilet I had just puked my soul into. Instead, I took a moment to calm down, then I called the police. I didn't know exactly what she had put in my food, so I claimed she had poisoned me. They arrested her, and in her questioning, she was apparently proud to admit what she had put in not just my food, but in many other people's food. She was substituting the sauce on the Krabby Patties with the putrid, diseased discharge and juices from her worn-out stinky well downstairs. To think the toxic fluids of that disgusting woman's crotch were in my mouth, that I chewed on it and absorbed it to any degree. It makes me sick to this day. Now I know why it took my food so long to come out. Because she took it to the bathroom and spent 10 minutes extracting unhealthy amounts of discharge from herself, by only God knows how, and smeared it all over my Krabby Patty. Unfortunately, there wasn't much punishment for her crime. She was fired from Wendy's and slapped with a fine of a few $1,000s. I wish she would rot in jail for what she did to me, and all the other undeserving people who just wanted a nice burger. She's a sick, perverted, heaping waste of flesh, and I hope karma takes care of her. I just hope nobody ever has to take that secret formula I had that night. This story was inspired by an alleged incident regarding a former Wendy's employee named Lakeisha Hunter, who was arrested for contaminating a customer's hamburger with her bodily fluids. The repulsive incident allegedly took place in August of 2005 at a Wendy's fast food restaurant. It was rumored that Hunter was arrested and led away in handcuffs after arguing with customer Lachey Jones over their child's father not coming to see her baby. Hunter then went to the back of the restaurant and used her quote-unquote discharge in place of mayonnaise on Lachey's Bacon Cheeseburger Deluxe. The two women who share the same father have been at each other's throats for a while. Lachey claims that she had the guy first and that Hunter ruined her family.
Ever since I graduated high school, my life has been in a slow decline. It's been 5 years since, and I've gained over 100 pounds. Everyone I used to know has gotten their college degrees and is starting their careers, but I'm still stuck in my mom's basement. I don't have a job, and I possess little to no drive to get one. I barely leave the house. I do everything I can to avoid even going upstairs. All I do is eat and game, and when I'm not gaming or eating, I'm rotting in my bed looking at my phone, or I'm on the hub, littering my room with tissues. It's the only way I can avoid my mom. If she's at home during the day and remembers I'm in the basement, she comes down and yells at me. It happens almost every day now.
Get out of bed and take a shower, you fat pig! Go outside and get a job! I'm tired of you slacking off, hogging the Wi-Fi, eating my food, going through my tissues and not paying me a dime in rent! You lazy mooch! If you don't start pitching in, I'm going to throw you out on the street!
Give me a break, Mom. I've been applying on Indeed.
My mom's usual threat of kicking me out landed harder than usual. It finally hit me that she wasn't lying this time. If I didn't want to be homeless, I needed to find a way to make money. The problem was, my mom was right. I was a waste of life. I didn't have a single real-world skill outside of a computer. Obviously, getting a job that required going outside wasn't an option for me. I needed something online, so I made accounts on every job site. Fiverr, Monster, Upwork, Indeed, all of them. I fabricated a bunch of credentials and experience on my resume in hopes of getting accepted by someone who wouldn't look that closely. Most of the jobs I applied for were bullshit jobs. However, on sites like Fiverr, then I saw the dream job listing. It was to be a video editor for this huge YouTuber with millions of subscribers. I'd heard of her before, but never got into her. It was Pokimane. It was the only job that excited me. I applied and sent her my resume, cover letter, the whole 9 yards. Then I pirated the latest editing software and brushed up on my skills. A few days passed as I prayed to get the job. I subscribed and binged all her content, hopping on all her streams and spamming in the chat to get her attention. She was so beautiful and perfect to me. That nose, it was so hot. I would have given everything to be her editor. Eventually, I got an email from her saying I got the gig. I began to lose my mind. My whole life had just been completely turned around for the better. We discussed terms and then she sent over hours of content she had recorded that I was supposed to edit. I was already in love with her, so getting to watch her exclusive content for hours on end was a dream come true. At first, I was worried she wouldn't like my work, but I think my passion prevailed. Finally, my life had purpose. Even better, I was making more than enough money to pay my mom rent and have some disposable income to throw around. Unfortunately, after a couple of months, my old habits resurfaced. I found it harder to focus on editing because of how hot Pokimane was. Her face and body were extremely triggering for me. I already felt like we had a closer relationship than any of her fans because we talked business over email, but I kept wanting more. Most of my leftover money was spent on her merch. I wanted my room to be like a Pokimane shrine. I even got her likeness printed on a body pillow that I slept with. I went through a dozen boxes of tissues a week. Gradually, I spent more time pleasuring myself to her videos than editing them. At some point, it was like I had negative testosterone. All the motivation I started with was drained downstairs. My whole life became fantasizing about Pokimane being my girlfriend, editing her videos and watching them for my own pleasure. Before long, my habits started to interfere with my work. I was no longer able to meet her deadlines. I sometimes turned over a video a week or two late. Pokimane got angry and emailed me, demanding an explanation. I kept lying and promised to be better, but eventually I had to come clean. I couldn't edit Pokimane's videos on time because I couldn't stop simping on her. I hoped she would understand, but she was disgusted. Then, she fired me, sending me back to square one. And once again, I was a jobless bum. I lost my mind. I had destroyed everything in my room that had anything to do with Pokimane. I screamed my head off in a storm of emotions. That's when my mom walked in.
Pokimane! Why? I loved you! How could you do this to me?
What in God's name are you screaming about? Who's this Pokimane? And why did you trash the room? Stop acting like a baby!
Shut up! Shut up! Shut up, you stupid saggy old lord of wrinkles!
This story was inspired by a creepy incident regarding a YouTuber named Pokimane, who unveiled a disturbing revelation to her fans earlier this year. If you are following Twitch, you might have noticed that Pokimane's fans tend to be on the clingier side. She recently had to let go of a video editor after his quote-unquote addiction to her content led to major workflow issues. In her latest Twitch stream, Pokimane said her ex-editor confessed to spending an inordinate amount of time watching her videos. The behavior left Pokimane feeling uncomfortable and with no choice but to cut ties with the editor. She acknowledged the awkwardness of the situation, saying she felt bad because she didn't think he realized how much he was struggling with that obsession.
I've been working at Walmart for over 30 years. In that time, I've done just about everything, from stocking shelves, working the cash register, to even being a manager for about 8 years. However, as I've gotten older, I had to retire from that position because I can't keep up with all the responsibilities. These days, I'm doing something very different, attending the self-checkout area. When I started working at Walmart, self-checkout wasn't even being thought of. I'm there to assist customers who have issues with the machines and scan IDs for certain purchases. But most of the time, I'm just standing there doing nothing. Another thing I dislike about the introduction of self-checkout is the new vulnerability to shoplifting. That's the other major part of my job, making sure people actually scan in everything they are taking with them. That was never an issue before when an employee was doing the scanning, but now I have to be the watchdog over the customers. There are a lot of people that I have to deal with, from rude, incorrigible customers to volatile creeps and weirdos under the influence of everything under the sun. Yet, there are also just the desperate people down on their luck. Things get even worse during the holidays, and nothing compares to the madness of Black Friday. There are so many people in the store that it's incredibly difficult to keep track of everything. And I know more shoplifting than usual gets past me on that day of the year. The lines are incredibly long, so when people finally get up to the self-checkout machines, they often scan stuff in faster than an actual employee. However, this last Black Friday, I encountered the worst kind of person. It was a lone large woman who had her cart overflowing with items. She made sure to acknowledge me and smile when she approached the machine she was using, but it did the opposite of putting me at ease. Her smile was very suspicious, and the condition of her hair, face, and clothes indicated to me that she was in a desperate situation, so I kept my eye out for her. Of course, I tried my best to not let on that I was watching her, so I pretended to ignore her. Unfortunately, she kept putting up more red flags. She repeatedly looked over her shoulder and made weird faces at me, as if she was checking to make sure I wasn't looking. That, and she was scanning things in at a snail's pace, visibly irritating the other customers in line. It was like she was stalling and waiting for me to lose focus. For the moment, I gave her the benefit of the doubt, so as is my responsibility when customers are having trouble, I went up and offered her assistance.
Excuse me, ma'am. Would you like any help?
Back off! Did you forget this was self-checkout, you wrinkly old shit?
No, ma'am, but you don't have to be rude.
Piss off!
I let her be, rather than continue to enrage her. With her outburst, it was evident she was a Karen. After that, I made it obvious that I was watching her. She must have thought I was blind or stupid or something, because she clearly only scanned 20 or 30 items out of the 100 that were in her cart. She paid and started to leave, but I got in front of her cart and stopped her.
Ma'am, would you please show me your receipt?
Why?
Well, I need to make sure you paid for everything in your cart. Just show me your receipt and then you can be on your way.
You think I'm stealing? Do I look like a criminal to you? I can't believe this! Let me go!
Ma'am, stop! You can't leave!
Get out of my way!
Suddenly, the woman rammed into me with her cart. I stumbled back and grabbed onto it, pushing her back as hard as I could. I heard people laughing at us instead of helping, as the woman bared her teeth and looked at me like she wanted to kill me. For just a moment, my footing slipped and I fell backwards. Then, the woman ran me over with her cart and trampled me. I couldn't get up from the pain, and I was unable to stop her, so I screamed for help. The security officers came just in time and prevented her from leaving the store. Several minutes later, I managed to get back on my feet as the cops arrived and arrested her. The scene of her screaming was still going on at that point, and it didn't stop until she was stuffed into the back of a cop car. She kept wailing and claiming that she had just been evicted and was starving and trying to feed her family, but I honestly didn't believe a word of it. That woman was the most greedy, gluttonous, nasty smear of shit I have ever met. Unfortunately, I don't know exactly what happened to her after that, but given that she was attempting to steal over $500 worth of merchandise, I imagine she spent some time in jail. If she really had just gotten evicted, a jail cell is the 4 walls and a roof over her head she deserves from assaulting me. I'm very anxious about confronting anyone at the self-checkout area now, especially on Black Friday. This story was inspired by a creepy Black Friday incident regarding a Fruitland Park woman who was arrested at Walmart after the theft of $355 in merchandise. Bevel Zeline Hinton, 45 years old, went to the store on Black Friday and loaded $425 worth of merchandise in her shopping cart. She proceeded to the self-checkout lane and scanned $75 worth of merchandise. She paid for that merchandise and proceeded to roll the cart to the exit without paying for the other items, which were mostly food and household products. She was stopped by store personnel and taken into custody by a deputy. Hinton told the deputy she had recently been evicted from her home and moved in with a roommate. She said she doesn't have any money. Hinton was arrested on a charge of theft and booked at the Marion County Jail. She was released on her own recognizance.
This happened back when I used to work the night shift at Wendy's. My days started out fairly busy, but always slows down after some time. By midnight, when we close the restaurant and switch to drive-thru only, it's usually pretty dead. I would usually use the last couple of hours of the shift to clean up before closing, but I often finished everything I needed to do pretty quickly, so I slacked off on my phone a lot. My co-workers are all the same way, so nobody gets in trouble. Nothing interesting ever happens late at night, so it gets really boring. It was business as usual. It had been 10 minutes since anyone ordered food. That is until someone finally came up to the drive-thru.
Hey, are you by yourself?
Their voice sounded weird over the intercom. It was definitely a man, but there was something up with him. Instead of ordering right away, he asked if anyone inside was celebrating a birthday. I didn't answer his question and asked him again what he wanted to order. My shift was almost over, so I didn't feel like taking his order, let alone have any conversation with him. Unfortunately, the guy wouldn't stop. No matter what I said to brush it off and get straight to the point, he kept asking about birthdays. I firmly kept reiterating no, but that wasn't the end of it. The guy then asked if anyone inside knew anybody else who was celebrating a birthday. I annoyingly told him I didn't know anybody else. That's when he asked me to go check with my coworkers and see. That was where I finally drew the line and told him I was not going to do that. Suddenly, the man shouted at me, demanding I do what he said. That's when I lost my shit and snapped at the guy, telling him to order or F off. Surprisingly, that worked. He backed down and apologized, though it didn't feel like a genuine apology. He ended up ordering some food and a soda, then he pulled up to the window in a pickup truck. By then, I had already made his drink. I opened the window and handed it to him, then opened my hand to ask him for payment. I hadn't even looked him in the eyes yet, as I was annoyed from the argument. But when I realized he wasn't putting anything in my hand, I looked up at him and saw the most disturbing face I had ever seen. The man looked like the creepiest weirdo ever. He looked like a zombie out of The Walking Dead. There was a huge smile plastered on his crusty face, but his eyes had a sinister look in them. He was the sort of person I would normally hesitate to even open the window for, had I been paying attention. What happened next was the most insane experience I have ever had at any job. Sir, can I see your card?
You don't need my card.
Well then, are you paying with cash?
No, you don't understand.
Sir, you have to pay or you won't be getting your food.
Don't worry, I have something for you. Just wait a second.
Hey, where are you going?
Just hold on, I'll be right there.
What the hell? Listen, I don't know what you're getting, but if it has to fit in the back of a truck, you can't buy a Baconator with it.
What the hell is he doing? Trust me, you're gonna love this. I know you said it wasn't your birthday, but I got a little present for you. There's an alligator trying to eat me! Somebody help! You bastard! I'm gonna turn this alligator into Crocs and kick the shit out of you with it!
I was stranded on that counter for almost an hour, even after I called 911. The gator had it out for me. I knew if I dangled my foot for just a second, I wouldn't have it anymore. When they arrived, the cops didn't want to deal with the gator, so animal control was called in. They finally captured the gator and took it away, ending the ordeal. The cops used the security footage to track down the man who threw the gator and arrested him. He told them he was just playing a joke and thought it was hilarious, but nobody agreed with him for obvious reasons. I nearly had my face bitten off. In my nightmares ever since that night, I'm never lucky enough to get away from that alligator in time. This story was inspired by a terrifying incident regarding a 24-year-old man named Joshua James, who was arrested and charged with assault with a deadly weapon after he threw a 3.5-foot alligator through a Palm Beach County Wendy's drive-through window. He's also charged with illegally possessing an alligator and petty theft. Jail records show he was released on $6,000 bail. He was ordered to have no contact with animals. A wildlife officer said in his report that James drove his pickup truck to the window at 1:20 a.m. on October 11th after an employee handed James his drink. That's when he threw the alligator through the window and drove off. No one was hurt. The wildlife officer captured the alligator and released it into the wild. James was later tracked down through video surveillance and a purchase at a neighboring convenience store. The culprit, James, later mentioned that he had found the alligator on the side of the road and put it into his truck, and then did what he did. James's mother, Linda James, told news outlets that her son's actions were just a stupid prank.
I think about this every year on Thanksgiving. It's the most chilling and sickening thing I've ever seen. I'm an officer of the Inverness Police Department in Florida, so I've seen quite a lot. But this was worse than anything. It was Thanksgiving Day. I was working, and unfortunately not with my family. I was annoyed about it, but I knew it came with the job. The day went by slowly for the first few hours, leaving me even more unprepared for what was about to happen. I was near the station when the call came in.
You've reached 911 Emergency Services. Please describe the nature of your emergency.
Please, you gotta get the cops here now.
Sir, please tell me what's happening.
I think my neighbor killed somebody.
And why do you think that?
Because I saw it. I was on my back porch setting up the deep fryer when I just looked over the fence for a second, and I saw my neighbor dragging something large. It looked like a body or something.
Sir, please calm down and tell me the address so I can send some officers to check on your neighbor.
I was one of about 7 or 8 officers initially dispatched to the scene. We were told to take caution, as a suspected homicide had occurred, so we approached the house carefully. There was a car parked in the driveway, but the garage door was closed. We also saw some tire tracks in the grass, leading from the car to a wide gate in the backyard. Nobody was in the car, but once we got about 6 feet from it, we were absolutely blasted with a putrid odor. It was that unmistakable stench of decay that you never forget. It made me throw up in my mouth. None of us were willing to attempt to open the trunk or search the inside of the car. The smell was enough to call for backup. We didn't know what to expect as we approached the front door, but we knew in our guts that we were dealing with a dangerous person. There was no answer when we banged on the door and announced ourselves. After several attempts to get the person inside to come out, we conducted a search of the exterior of the house. 2 fellow officers and I went around to the right side, following the tire tracks through the gate and into the backyard. As soon as we turned the corner, we were met with a grisly scene. In the center of a concrete slab was a huge pool of blood. A smear ran about 8 to 10 feet from the puddle across the concrete and ended where the grass started, right at the tire tracks. Next to the puddle was a large meat cleaver covered in blood. At this point, all the alarms went off. We called in for even more backup, quickly surrounding the house. I returned to the front of the house with the other officers and began pounding on the door. Police, open up the door, we're gonna break it down. Come out with your hands up. A chill ran down my spine at the sound that came from inside. We knew what we had to do then, so we got the battering ram and broke down the door. We entered the house 8 deep with our weapons drawn, but we didn't get far before another terrible sight put an end to our search. There was an older man on the living room couch, smiling and staring off into space. There was blood soaking into his shirt. Something about that image made me freeze. I've never seen something so creepy like that in my life. He acted like we weren't even there. One of my fellow officers ended up making the arrest a moment later, throwing him off the couch and onto the ground. The man didn't struggle against the handcuffs at all. He was gaunt and unbothered by the whole ordeal. We called in an ambulance and the paramedics took him away under our supervision. He later died at the hospital, taking all his secrets with him. However, at the time, we were still at the house, and there was a body we had to look for. When CSI arrived and asked us where the body was, everyone pointed to the car in unison. When the investigators got near it, they looked in through the windows, but there was nothing. That left the trunk which they had to pry open. I remember standing behind the investigators at the car, far enough away to keep from gagging. Despite knowing what was going to be in there, I had a morbid and regretful curiosity about what led to that massacre scene I saw in the backyard. I'll never forget the moment that trunk flew open, revealing the worst thing I have ever witnessed in my entire life. There were body parts in the trunk. It had been chopped up into pieces and tossed in without a care. The sheer terror I felt at that moment was something I never felt in all my years on duty. I had to go back to the station after that. I wasn't part of the investigation, but I kept tabs on it. Apparently, the man that was on the couch had taken out and dismembered the victim and stuffed him in his own trunk. The victim was also an older man, but aside from that, there was no connection between them. There was no known motive either. The vehicle belonged to the victim. To have no reason for such a horrific incident is just unbelievable to me, and it leaves a pit in my stomach every time I think about it. I just hope the family of the victim can somehow recover from their loss. This story was inspired by a horrific incident regarding a 75-year-old Florida man named Jonathan Dimmick Sr., who was found dead on Thanksgiving Day after he allegedly dismembered another man. The suspect then placed the remains in the trunk of his car. Deputies raced to a home in the area of Post Street and Eden Drive to perform an urgent welfare check after getting a call about a possible slaying. When police arrived, they knocked on the front door and announced themselves, but received no answer. Deputies then began checking the home's perimeter. That's when they spotted in the backyard a large butcher-style knife, along with blood and drag marks on the ground. The deputies continued trying to contact Jonathan Dimmick Sr., who they identified as a suspect in the crime. Deputies then entered the home and found Dimmick sitting in his living room unresponsive, with an apparent wound to the abdomen. He was treated at the scene by first responders and then airlifted by a helicopter to a hospital, where he later passed away from his injuries. Meanwhile, deputies continued their investigation and eventually made a gruesome discovery of the dismembered remains of a 67-year-old man named James Banks in the trunk of his own car. A Citrus County sheriff made a statement saying the scene was absolutely shocking and that it was unfortunate that the suspect will never be prosecuted for his brutal crime. Police took solace in knowing that the victim's family can now begin their grieving process with the knowledge that no one will ever again suffer by the hands of Mr. Dimmick. The sheriff's office has not said how Banks may have known Dimmick. What makes the case even more unsettling was that there was no motive for the slaying allegedly. I remember being strongly opposed to doing any sort of Black Friday shopping when it was mentioned over Thanksgiving dinner. My wife begged me to take her shopping. I tried to get out of it by telling her she should just go by herself, but she didn't want to shop alone and said she would be scared of the large crowds on her own. After a lot of back and forth, I gave in and agreed to go with her. She decided we needed to go early in the morning, right when they opened, so that there wouldn't be as many people there as in the afternoon, and nothing would be out of stock by the time we got there. And so when the morning came, we drove and got there 5 minutes after they opened. From what we could see, it was an absolute madhouse. The parking lot was full to the brim. People were lining up on the street just to get in, and then they were waiting to even get into the store. I saw several people almost get hit by cars within a few minutes of trying to find a spot. Everyone was driving and walking around like they were on edge, as if their survival hinged on getting a discounted blender. And then there were the Karens, nasty old women driving around in Chevy Suburbans, parting the seas of shoppers with a field of unbridled rage and screeching out of the windows, racing in to get another 50-inch smart TV for their fourth kid's bedroom. It was chaos, and it was getting to me. At one point, in the seemingly endless search for a parking spot, my wife sighed and said to me that we should have gotten there early, as in well before the store even opened, and I snapped at her. I felt bad and apologized, but it was just the nature of that moment. It turned everyone into animals. Finally, after over 20 minutes, I finally spotted a minivan backing out of a space on the left side. I stopped close to them, leaving just enough room for them to turn. And when they finally got out of the way, I hit the gas and went straight for it. Suddenly, another car came out from behind the van, heading right for a head-on collision. We saw each other at the last second and slammed on the brakes, narrowly avoiding a crash. The corners of both cars were partially in the spot, and just inches from each other. It was dead on, 50-50, but I knew I had seen it first, so I wasn't letting it go. I rolled down my window and went ballistic on him.
Back the hell up! That's my spot! Screw you! I was gonna make it in first until you nosed in! Nosed in? I've been waiting for it for 20 goddamn minutes! So go find somewhere else to park, asshole!
After I told him off the first time, the man ducked his head back into his car. I waited for a few more seconds, expecting him to back up and drive off. But then his hand came back out of the window, and he threw a bag full of trash at my car. I was pissed, and the stuff kept coming. Most of it missed, and none of it was that gross, but it got under my skin like nothing else. In a moment of rage, I grabbed a half-full cup of soda from the day before and chucked it at the window, splattering it all over his windshield. I felt a surge of satisfaction, but then regret. The man got quiet, then stepped out of his car, opened his trunk, then took out a baseball bat. I reacted as fast as I could, throwing the car in reverse and trying to maneuver out of the way, but I couldn't get away fast enough. He smashed the headlights out, causing my wife to start screaming. I looked back for a moment to see where it was clear to go, and when I looked forward again, the man had climbed onto the hood. He looked me dead in the eyes. Then he swung the bat down and smashed the windshield. He kept hitting it until the whole thing fell on us. By then, my wife was in a state of total panic, so I knew I had to get us the hell out of there as soon as possible. I floored it in reverse, causing him to lose his balance and tumble off the roof. I threw the car back into drive as he scrambled to get to his feet. Then I slammed the gas and pointed the car straight for him. At the last second, he dove out of the way. I kept going and swerved to the right, trying not to plow into his car, but I clipped the back end and took out one of his taillights, evening the score just a bit. I drove out of the parking lot and went a couple blocks down the road, where I could finally find a place to park and calm my wife down. We called the cops, but as expected, the man who attacked us wasn't there when they arrived. All they found was the broken glass from the encounter. Nobody was able to get a good look at the license plate either, as it was still covered in snow from the night before. All we know is that the cops were looking for a green Toyota Camry with rear driver's side damage. Unfortunately, the man still hasn't been found, and we don't expect him to be at any point. Now, even though I already hated everything about Black Friday, I have another reason for it to be the worst day of the year. This story was inspired by a horrific Black Friday incident that happened in Tallahassee, Florida. 2 people were injured with a firearm in a dispute over a parking space outside a Walmart. At about 12:30 p.m., police responded to the parking lot after the witnesses reported someone letting off in a rage. Officers found 2 people injured, a man and a woman, who were taken to the hospital with injuries that were not life-threatening. Both are expected to make a full recovery. Police said the victims were going to the store together when the confrontation with a rival driver began. Both were arguing for the same spot in a busy area when the rival started letting off. Authorities declined to provide further details on the incident. No arrests have been made, but officers were looking for a green Toyota Camry that fled the scene. This happened a few years ago around Thanksgiving. I used to work at the butcher and deli section of a supermarket. The job itself was great. I like carving up the carcasses and interacting with the customers to prepare stuff made to order. The general environment of the kitchen had a pretty good vibe. I spent most of my time prepping various cuts of meat, like deboning chicken and cutting steaks. Otherwise, I was cleaning and chatting with my coworkers. The majority of the people I worked with were pretty cool, except for the one guy I spent the most time with. This fat slob named Sean. He was the head of the butcher department, so I trained and worked under him. I was forced to get to know him quite well. He was a real creep though, always pushing the boundaries of what would get him in trouble with the female employees. The guy must have thought I was buddies with him or something, because he was comfortable enough to go overboard with the harassing jokes with me.
Hey Mike, was that your mom that just came in and bought a turkey?
Yeah, why?
'Cause she's smoking hot. You never told me your mom was such a MILF. You know, the turkeys here got enough room for my stuffing.
He was more immature than myself despite the age difference. One of his favorite things to do was to tell me to go somewhere in the kitchen and grab something, only to watch me fall from the wet floor. He would then come over with a wet floor sign and make a joke out of my expense. I knew the piece of shit was doing it intentionally, literally risking a lawsuit just for a laugh. Despite the humiliation and bruises, I put up with Sean's crap. I didn't want to get on his bad side and make things even worse for myself. That, and I was growing genuinely interested in the idea of working in a butcher or a deli as a long-term career. Maybe even opening my own shop one day. So I needed to get good experience. That said, I always hoped he would call out of work or find something to do that wasn't around me. Then, last year, in the days leading up to Thanksgiving, we got a huge influx of business in the whole store, concentrated on us in the butcher department. Everybody wanted to get their hands on a turkey or a ham. People were coming in at the last minute. For the most part, Sean put his nose to the grindstone and kept up with things. However, something else about his routine also changed. During the 3 days before Thanksgiving, one of our tasks was to prepare the pre-stuffed and pre-brined turkeys. That was the only time of year we did that, just to make it easier for people cooking large Thanksgiving feasts. For that reason, I had never been trained to do it, so it was something I wanted to try for the first time. Unfortunately, Sean wouldn't let me near the process. Something about the whole thing just seemed sketchy as hell, but I couldn't really do much about it. For about an hour each day, he sealed himself off in his own corner of the kitchen and wouldn't let anyone disturb him. And when I got involved, the guy would snap.
Get the hell away from me before I stuff you with my fist!
When I asked why I couldn't be a part of it, he said it was more of a culinary process than a butchering process, so I would probably screw it up. I brushed it off and kept busy. Then at 5 o'clock, my shift ended. I took home one of Sean's pre-prepared turkeys, as the manager of the store let anyone who worked on Thanksgiving Day take home a bird at a heavy discount. But since I was in the butcher department, I got it for free. It was a nice perk to take home to my family. They waited to start cooking until I got home, so we didn't sit down to eat until about 8 or 9 o'clock. I was very much looking forward to the feast after a long day at work, but as everyone was loading up their plates, my phone rang. It said it was an unknown number, so out of curiosity, I answered it. On the other end, I heard a weird, muffled voice that sounded vaguely familiar.
Hey, are you eating turkey for Thanksgiving?
Yeah. Who is this?
Is it stuffed?
Who is this? Is this some kind of prank?
I just thought you should know that the stuffing is full of deadly poison.
Wait, what? What the? Hey, guys, don't eat the turkey. I think it's poisoned.
After I warned my family, I immediately called my boss and told him the pre-stuffed turkeys might be poisoned. He snapped at me, blaming me for the situation and yelling about how I was going to get him sued. But I didn't care if he fired me. I just wanted to save people from getting poisoned. As it turns out, the turkeys actually were poisoned. There were several complaints lobbed at the store about people getting sick after eating them, but luckily, nobody died. However, the store did get sued. By then, I was long gone and working somewhere else. It was never proven, but I know without a shadow of a doubt that Sean was the one poisoning the turkeys. There's no other reason for his secrecy regarding the process of preparing them. I just can't believe I worked so closely with such a sick freak. This story was inspired by a bizarre Thanksgiving incident regarding an anonymous caller who claimed he had injected packages of Lilydale turkey parts with poison. This of course caused the franchise to go into a panic. After examining 1,600 packages of turkey parts at a Victoria grocery chain, the Canadian Food Inspection Agency says it's found no evidence of deliberate poisoning. Despite finding nothing, all the turkeys were destroyed. The company has since raised its quality inspection standards, even though there were no signs of poisoning to mitigate risks of it even happening, since the whole ordeal got media and public awareness.
They call me the problem child, the YouTuber turned boxer. Ever since I beat Daisy 6 years ago, I've had a taste for blood. But my days as an entertainer have taught me to always put on a show. That's why I go for the big names, the older boxers with millions of fans and huge reputations. Every time one of them hits the mat, millions of dollars enter my bank account, and thousands of people are convinced to finally take me seriously as a boxer. Perry, Diaz, Woodley, I'm gonna knock out every loser they put in front of me and crawl my way up to the top until the first thing that people think of me when they hear the name Jake Paul is greatest boxer in the world. I train every single day to be stronger and faster in the ring, to take more hits and keep going for longer. And I study various techniques to know exactly what I'm doing in the ring at all times. I live, eat, and breathe boxing. I can honestly say that I've never once been afraid to enter the ring and fight anyone. Never. Not until now. I've known for some time that to reach the pinnacle of boxing, there's one man I have to defeat. The greatest boxer of all time that still lives. Mike Tyson. Almost every night, I study his old fights, alone in my room with the lights off, right in front of the TV, absorbing every aspect of his technique, his faults, every strike and every slip-up. I need to know what I should expect from him. He says the fight won't last long unless I run from him, but I don't think he understands who he's dealing with. That's the best chance I have of winning, letting Mike underestimate me. I certainly am not underestimating him. Ever since we signed on to fight, I've had a growing, gnawing feeling of fear, and I've done everything in my power to make sure I am prepared to take the strikes from the strongest puncher in the world. I must admit that sometimes when I see a video of him knocking someone out, I panic a little. On nights like that, I feel I have no other choice but to dip into my stash of my secret weapon. It sits in a box in my closet. All that's in there is a few vials of liquid and some syringes.
Tyson!
A few nights before the fight, I went so crazy that I punched a hole through the bag. I train every day until I'm exhausted. Then I crash into bed and pass out. Most nights, I'm too wiped out to have any dreams, but when I do, it's always about fighting Mike Tyson. One night, I was sleeping soundly. I kept tossing and turning in my room, unable to sleep. It was like I was having nightmares about possibly losing to him. I then heard the floorboards creak. I immediately opened my eyes and saw him standing in the corner, smiling as he watched me.
What are you doing here? Are you even real?
Oh, I'm real, baby. Real happy to see you.
What are you talking about? We're supposed to fight each other in like 3 days. No, stay away from me. Stay away!
Come on, problem child. Why don't you get out of bed and dance for me? You know I like to watch you dance, just like the old Disney times.
Why are you being such a creep? Get out of my house!
Don't I remember you saying you wanted to kiss my big juicy lips? We can make that happen.
No way! Get away from me, you sick freak!
Then I'll just have to kiss your dead body!
Suddenly, I was back,
and I was in the ring. The crowd was going insane, but my head was spinning. What had just happened? Was that a flashback? Did I get punched in the head so hard I hallucinated the whole thing? I tried to get my bearings before Tyson charged into me, but then I saw him sitting on the mat with his back on the ropes. There was blood all over his mouth, and it looked like I'd beaten him pretty badly. Then, the ref took my right hand and lifted it up into the air. I was the winner. I won! But then, something hit me. I couldn't hear anything. I should have been hearing the loudest screaming in my life, but it was total silence. I looked back at Mike. He was smiling despite the fact that I had beaten him. Then, his smile widened to an ear-to-ear grin, and 2 bloody pieces of flesh fell out of his mouth. I stared at them on the mat for a moment before I realized those were my ears. I put my hands up to the sides of my head, but it was just a flat, bloody mess where my ears had been ripped off.
Every time I wake up, I see myself in the mirror on the ceiling. My reflection no longer fits within its borders, but it's there to remind me at the start of every day how far I've come, or rather, how far I've gone. It's all part of the plan. There are mirrors all around the house just like it to make sure I never lose sight of it. The hardest part of each day is simply getting out of bed. Then I make my way to the bathroom, doing my best not to trip over my own thighs. I don't brush my teeth anymore. It goes against the plan. Any food residue left over in my mouth needs to be digested, not scrubbed away. All I do is rinse with mouthwash to freshen my breath. Then I swallow. I can't spit it out, of course. I need the calories. After I finish my morning evacuations, I head over to the kitchen. On the way there, I always thank God that I live in a nice little bungalow, as I could never deal with the stairs. I used to cook myself elaborate meals, but I don't have the time for that anymore. Why would I anyway when there are so many delicious restaurants to choose from? All I have to do is find something that fits within the YouTube schedule and agenda. The Chinese place won't deliver to the house anymore. Same with the Subway, the Wendy's, the McDonald's, Taco Bell. Oh, there's a new barbecue place in town. Let's order one of everything on their menu. It usually takes about an hour for the Uber Eats driver to finally show up with the food. They always give me such a bad attitude. It's like they're expecting some sort of tip for doing their job. Well, I don't get a tip for doing my job. I just do it, and that's that. I take all the food and set up in the filming room. Everything has to be done right. The walls, the floor, the ceiling, the table, everything must be perfectly white. And all the food has to be set up so that every single thing is visible to the camera. If one thing is out of place, the video doesn't work, and then I'm in trouble. Then, the next hardest part of the day, filming. Hello world, it's me, the king of mukbang! And today we're chowing down on some delicious, juicy, saucy barbecue! We got ribs, we got brisket, we got pork, beans, chicken, mashed potatoes, corn, broccoli. Ew, wait, broccoli? I hate broccoli! Ha, who am I kidding? It's all going down this gaping gullet, and Orland's not here today, so all this is just for me. I'm 2 steps ahead. Well, what do you say? How about we get started? Oh, yes, it's so good. Oh, yes, it's so good. You know, I wish I could eat the bones, too. Wait a gosh darn second. What's stopping me? Nobody's stopping me. I'm always 2 steps ahead. Now come here, little ribbies. You're not getting away from me. Ah! Oh my gosh, that was amazing. I did it! I ate it all! Are you happy now? Are you satisfied? Well, just remember, I'm always 2 steps ahead. Anyways, bye! Now I have to clean all this up. I don't want to do this anymore! No, Master, I didn't mean it. I take it all back. I swear, you don't have to come in here. I'll fix everything. No, please, please, no! You've made quite a mess, haven't you? Must have been a good video. Yes, I think so. Good boy. The people love watching your horrid, inhuman, disgusting face gorge itself on garbage food, getting more shameful and grotesque every single day. Yes, you're right, as always. Of course I am. Now hand me the camera, pig. We're filming 2 mukbangs today, remember? Yes, I remember. Oh, and another thing. Yes, Master? Don't forget.
I am always 2 steps ahead.